Greetings and welcome to another episode of I Thunderbird. Today's episode is very special. We actually have a live interview with Gregg Braden, the author of the new book Deep Truth, as well as the Isaiah Effect. We got to meet with him in Delray Beach. He was doing a talk there, and we got to hang out with him thanks to some special friends. And now we actually had it as a video, and we're going to put it on YouTube, and I think I still will. It was in this beautiful setting in a friend of ours' place called the Red Tent. Well, the video cut out about 5 minutes into the video filming. So I have luckily managed to keep an audio file of it, and I'm publishing it this way. I hope you get something out of it. Again, this is not a sermon or a lecture. Please comment over at Thunderbird at ithunderbird.com. You can send an email or just even a voice memo recorded on your smartphone and emailed over to Thunderbird at ithunderbird.com. I'll get you in on the podcast and get a discussion about what it means to be truly free and liberated in this world. And here we go. So we're here with Gregg Braden, the author of Deep Truth, one of my personal heroes. I read Isaiah Effect a long time ago, and it really moved me. Yeah, and one of the preeminent minds and thinkers of our times in exploring some of the positive visions that we can have for the future and what it means to be alive right now. So thank you for being with us.
I am honored. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So let's talk about Deep Truth.
Thank you for having me here in this feminine vortex where we find ourselves right now.
Yeah, right now we're in the Red Tent, which is it's in Delray Beach, and it's a rejuvenation of the ancient principle of the Red Tent, where the women would gather during their cycles, and they wouldn't be suffering as men tend to have thought, but they would be celebrating, and it's really a powerful time insofar as that they weren't allowed in sweat lodges at times because of it, and it was not because that they were impure or anything, it was they were too powerful. And that's really the secret behind it. I don't know if that's been a discussion you've had, but that's
sure.
Yeah. So here we are, being our space is being held by that sacred feminine.
Thanks for having me today.
Right on.
Thanks for holding that beautiful book in your hand.
Yeah, dude, it's really awesome. Who are we?
Well, the purpose of this book, and I'm just going to start by talking about the title of the book is called Deep Truth. Mm-hmm. One of the first things I found when I wrote this book was that truth means different things to different people.
Yeah.
And there were some people who actually felt it was very presumptuous to even write a book with the title "Truth" in the title, or the word "truth," because there's so many different ideas of what it means. The title comes from a statement, a quote that one of the great minds of the 20th century, physicists, made, Niels Bohr, in a conversation he was having with Albert Einstein in the mid-20th century, and they were talking about the nature of scientific truth. And it was during a time where new discoveries were being made, seeming like every month.
Yeah.
A new paper was published that changed everything everybody thought was true about the past. And what Niels Bohr said, as a friend and colleague of Einstein's, what he said is that it is the hallmark of any deep truth that its negation is also a deep truth. So what he was saying was that when new discoveries give us new understandings of our relationship to ourselves and the world and the past and the future, that those discoveries must be incorporated into what we claim to be true about our lives and our world. And I said, this is a perfect title for this book. This book actually is a rare book for me because the book was almost complete before the title was ever even selected. I didn't know what I was going to call the book. Yeah. The reason it's so perfect is this is exactly where we find ourselves today, and I think it's going to lead right into this conversation about who are we. We find ourselves, the best minds of our time are very clear that this generation right now, we're living the greatest crises, the greatest number of crises ever to face a single generation in 5,000 years of human history, and each crisis by itself is of the greatest magnitude. Never, they say, have so many people had to solve so many big problems in such a small period of time. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do it is to think differently about ourselves, our relationship to the earth, our relationship to our food, our relationship to our bodies, and to the past. Mm-hmm. This is where deep truth comes in. Because the reason the crises exist is we live in a world based upon beliefs, many of them in the West, scientific beliefs, the last 150 years that we now know are based on false scientific assumptions. Mm-hmm. Peer-reviewed data are telling us, not speculation, it's not a hypothesis, they are factually false. But the ideas are still being taught in the school, and the ideas that led to the crises represent a way of thinking that people are still using to try to solve the crises, which is why we are in big, big problems right now. Yeah. So you'd think the good news, and that people would be thrilled that new discoveries are showing us where the ideas are based on false assumptions. But the flip side is that there is a reluctance.
Yeah,
and in many cases, there is an outright resistance to share this information, to share the discoveries in the mainstream media, mainstream documentaries, mainstream television, mainstream classrooms, mainstream textbooks. And I want to be very clear, it's not the fault of the teachers. In the United States of America, every teacher is bound by a covenant to the state in which they teach. The state determines the curricula of which can and cannot be taught. And even when the science shows us the curricula is false, until the school boards change that curricula, they must stick to the curricula that has been developed.
Right.
So the bottom line is we have a whole generation of young people now
being taught the wrong things.
That are, number one, they're ready to devote their lives into solving some of the greatest mysteries of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, they are being asked to solve the problems that another generation is leaving behind. And in both cases, they're being required to do it within the same thinking that we now know has led to the crisis and we now know is false.
Yeah.
So the bottom line to all this, when I started writing this book, this is a long answer to a short question.
It's all good.
When I began writing this book, I mean, obviously, everybody is telling us, scientists, engineers, philosophers, religious leaders, spiritual leaders, social leaders, they're all social architects, they're all telling us something's wrong. And that we've got to act. And we've got to act quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And my question was how? How can we possibly solve the greatest crises,
right.
make the kinds of decisions, pass the laws, create the policies
We're facing extraordinary challenges.
Absolutely, affect our lives and our future until we answer the deepest question of our existence. And it's a very deceptively simple question. The question simply is, who are we?
Mm-hmm.
Or as individuals, we each ask ourselves every day, who am I?
Yeah.
Now, people ask me and say, well, Greg, cool question. What does it have to do with anything? And the answer is, it has everything to do with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because every choice that we have ever made, any of us, in our entire lives, from the time that we're very young until this moment or from this moment forward, every decision we will ever make, every crisis that has ever crossed our paths personally, every challenge that has faced us collectively, the way that we solve those crises and problems and challenges is through the lens of the way we think of ourselves and our relationship to the world, and it's largely based on false assumptions of science. So in the book, I've chosen five of those false assumptions. There are many, but I've chosen five that I feel are really key and are wreaking the greatest havoc. Everything from the economic meltdown that we're seeing on the planet right now, the new diseases that have no medical cure, the growing threat of war, global war looming on the horizon in the Middle East, the way we deal with the way we deal with climate change. All of these things right now, the way that we solve or answer the challenge now that's crossing all of our paths is based on how we answer the question, who are we, or as individuals, who am I? So maybe a thing to do, can I identify the five false assumptions?
Of course.
And then...
I really like the cooperation versus competition.
Well, then we'll zero in
all right,
on the
do
one.
Go ahead.
So I'll just share the five false assumptions in the book. They're all being taught. When I was in school back in the 60s and 70s, young people today are being taught the same things. The first one is a Darwinian assumption that says that life in general, and human life specifically, are explained by what we call evolution. And the problem is the data simply does not support that statement.
Right.
The data no longer, I don't know that it ever did, but right now the new discoveries, the archaeological, anthropological, and the genetic research definitely does not support those discoveries. We can talk about that if we want. That's false assumption number one. Number two, civilization. We are taught that civilization is only about 5,000 years old.
What about all the parts?
Exactly. It's a one-time deal. It's linear. It started 5,000 years ago. Mesopotamia, ancient Sumeria has evolved to the point that we see it today in a linear fashion. The problem, again, is that the data simply doesn't support that.
Yeah. I heard that there was like a gold strand that was 3 million years old found in coal in West Virginia.
There's so many. I
of
was just in a conference with a gentleman named Michael Cremo.
Yes.
Who wrote an amazing book entitled Forbidden Archaeology. I can't vouch for 100% of the discoveries, but what I can say is there's enough information in there to cast serious doubt on what we've been led to believe.
Exactly.
The third false assumption is based in physics. And it's an assumption that says that consciousness is somehow separate from our physical world.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is the data tells us consciousness is the missing element in the unified field theory. And the preeminent scientist, John Wheeler, Princeton University, he just died in 2008, he was a colleague of Albert Einstein's. He came to that conclusion before his death, that consciousness is the stuff that everything is made of.
Yeah.
And
it's
that
actually the seat that we actually float in.
That we interact
Yeah.
with this stuff all the time. So consciousness, separate from our physical world, that is a false assumption. And the fourth false assumption is related. It says that the space between physical things is empty. That somehow the space between a nucleus of an atom and the first electron, or between you and me, science historically said if you can't see it, you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That leaves a whole lot of unexplained universe out there.
I mean, dogs can hear at a greater frequency than we can. The
Sure.
elephants, there's got to be more that's going on.
Sure.
If we see the visible light spectrum, it's like this, and all of this is going on.
Number 5 is another Darwinian assumption. It's the last in this list, but I think it's the first that you probably want to talk about. And this is the false assumption that Charles Darwin made in 1859 that says that nature is based upon a model of survival, what he called survival of the strongest. It was later interpreted as survival of the fittest. The problem is the facts simply don't support the data. New discoveries don't support that. So this book came out in October of 2011. And I was in Europe with the book when it came out, and whether it was European audiences or Asian audiences or here in the States, people say, okay, Greg, we get that Darwin maybe wasn't 100% accurate. Again, what difference does it make now? I mean, this is early 21st century. That was 1859.
Right.
And the answer surprises a lot of people. But the answer is that the world that we know, this civilization in the West, largely as we know it, is based on ideas that were developed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Darwin was the first scientist that took a scientific stab at explaining the great mysteries of life.
Right.
Before that time, the church, the religious institutions, spiritual, indigenous traditions.
No.
Yeah, well, they were the ones that tried to do it.
Yeah.
So because Darwin was a scientist, his ideas were accepted very quickly without a lot of question. People didn't really say, is this right or wrong? They just accepted it. They embraced it. His ideas became very deeply entrenched. This idea is survival of the fittest, that we live in a dog-eat-dog world.
Cornerstone of our civilization.
That there's one pie out there, and everybody's got to fight for your slice.
Yeah.
That is the basis for the economic collapse that's happening on our planet right now. It's the basis for the collapse of the corporate structure as we know it today. It is the basis for the greatest wars and the suffering of the 20th century. Historians are telling us that the 20th century that we've just lived through was hands down the single bloodiest century in all of recorded human history.
Yeah.
Hands down. And I first heard that, I thought, well, maybe it's because there are more people in the 20th century. Did they get the ratios right? And when they figure it all out, it's not because there are more people, but per capita, more people died in the 20th century, and they died because they were different from others in genocide and suffering based largely in genocide in any other century in 5,000 years of recorded human history. And many of the principles that led to that degree of suffering are the same principles that are leading to the crises that we're seeing today, and they're still in place today in the early 21st century. So Darwin's idea, survival of the strongest, it was based on, I'm just going to be very clear, I'm not down on Darwin. I think he did the best he could.
It's kind of like an emotional pattern that we have as an individual that doesn't serve us after a period of time. It serves us as a child. We make a decision that we repeat and becomes our personality, facing something that happens to us. And we do it over and over again, and it serves us. But then it stops serving us.
It's habit.
Yeah.
Darwin's ideas, they weren't really questioned. Nobody really checked them out. And in my opinion, this is a Greggism, I think this is where Darwin went wrong. He took some observations that he made for some forms of life in some parts of the world that I'm sure were very accurate, but he had tried to then apply those observations to all life everywhere, including humans. The problem is the data doesn't support that at all. So, for example, classic example, he would look at two birds in a nest. They were siblings. And another bird of another kind would come into the nest, and the siblings in the instance that he saw it, they would kick that bird out and leave it to die. Or he would look at one species of ants. Because they were bigger and stronger than other ants, they would capture and enslave another ant colony. They didn't kill them. They enslaved them and made them work so that larger ants could do other things. So Darwin saw these things in nature. And in his own language, what he said was that these were small consequences of a general law that applies to all life. And I know you all have heard the law before. He said the law in nature is multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. Let the strongest live and the weakest die. That is such a dangerous way of thinking.
Yeah.
And
it's callous as well.
It has had such a powerful impact. It's what our corporations are based on. It's what the Western business model is based on.
Competition.
Competition. I want to say a couple of words about this. But first I'm going to say something else.
Okay.
So this is what Darwin suggested. The problem with this way of thinking is that the studies, the science of the 20th century simply doesn't support it. There were over 400 peer-reviewed studies that were done in the 20th century asking one question. And the question was simply this: how much competition is optimum in the environment, in the classroom, in the workplace, on the playing field? How much competition really helps us? And we talk about this kind of competition, and this is what I want to say, this is violent competition. It's not a friendly game of chess or soccer. And I'm going to make a distinction here. There's a subtle, powerful distinction between a competition that is based on exploiting the weakness of another. That's one kind of competition. And then there's another kind of competition where we excel and become our best, not in response to anything else. It's other than our own excellence is what it is. That's a very different kind of competition. And what Darwin was talking about was this exploitation of the weakness of others. So again, people say, Greg, what difference could that possibly make? You look at the world that we're living in today, it's largely based on the model of survival of the strongest, not of the economic systems. But when we look at some of the greatest human suffering in the 20th century, Adolf Hitler is a perfect example.
Yeah.
He based his ideas, he paraphrased Darwin to justify what he did, but he never gave Darwin credit. He took the credit for himself. He said, these are my ideas. Chairman Mao also quoted Darwin, but he gave Darwin credit. And Chairman Mao said, because these are scientific ideas, it justifies
our behavior.
What we're doing. And what they did was they judged members of their societies inferior to others and eliminated them through genocide. He said it's a scientific principle. It's based on Darwin's ideas.
And that's kind of like what's happening in our economic
It's
system.
still happening.
And they're using that scientific anytime you need to justify your actions, you're probably doing the wrong thing. And if
it's
you can make a blanket
precisely,
statement like that.
and it's still happening today.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be very clear again. I don't think Darwin intended for those consequences. He had no way of knowing his work would be used that way. But the reason I'm sharing this, it is the danger of perpetuating a false scientific assumption and making it into a religion, which essentially is what science has become. So the new data, the new studies, what is the optimum amount of competition? And this is where this is so amazing, because scientists rarely use broad, sweeping generalizations, and they do in this answer.
Yeah.
What they say is that in any circumstance, in the classroom, in the home, in the workplace, in the playing field, the optimum amount of competition is 0. Always, always, always cooperation is the way to go. That competition hurts the individuals. It hurts
the system.
Hurts the system.
Your body is a cooperative system of billions of cells.
That's a beautiful example of it. And the very prestigious journals, New Scientist.
And they made that blanket statement.
They did, but
Wow.
in the very prestigious journal, it was New Scientist, April 2008, Michael LePage took it one step further, and he said, and this is a quote, he said, what we see in nature is not every animal for itself. He said cooperation is a very, very powerful system. When cooperation breaks down, the results are disastrous. You just gave a beautiful example. If you want to know how deep and how fundamental cooperation is in our lives, the body that's watching that program and this body here and that body there, we're only possible because 50 trillion cells in our bodies are cooperating. And when they don't cooperate, that's when people say they're sick. It's nature. So just to be clear, competition does happen in response to some conditions. The competition is not the rule of nature. It's not the law that nature is based upon.
Right.
If we attempt to solve the great crises of our time, now we're coming back full circle. There's a big war looming on the horizon in the Middle East. A lot of people pushing for war because they think it's good for the economy. They think the world needs that war. They have neglected the fact that peace is creates a very viable economy. Mm-hmm. But the response to the crises are based in this way of thinking. It says nature is based upon survival of the strongest. We're about to find out where the extremes of that thinking can lead. And this is one example of the danger of...
Well, how do we bypass that? How do we move past? Because if we are going to be cooperative, I mean, the military-industrial complex, for instance, in the United States, is the single biggest industry. If we were to shut that down and say we're going to be peace,
or transform that industry,
well, that's what I'm asking. How do we transform it? I had an idea of instead of having World War III, how about we turn it into the World Cup III, where it's like we have war games essentially and make a big economy out of it.
I think this is the generation that walks away from war
totally.
As a response. And I'm saying that we're seeing it happen in some other countries. They're refusing to follow the leaders of the orders of their military to fire upon their own people, number one. But there's something even much deeper that's happening in this. So before we go to that, let's go back to the conversation we had before the camera was turned on.
Okay.
This is 2012. What does that mean?
Right. And who, as a collection of trillions of cells working in unison, in cooperation, then who am I really?
Sure.
Am I this body? No. There is something operating it. And how disconnected from nature are we really? Are we the divine expression of cosmos, of love, expressed in this cooperation?
Well, here's what we know. I'll start with the facts.
All right.
Here's what we know. It is a fact that we are living the last year of a rare and mysterious cycle of time. That's a 5,125-year-long cycle that began with a rare astronomical event in August of 3114 BC. This is in the biblical era. And it is a fact that there have been at least 4 cycles like ours before this one.
Yes.
At least 4. We're living the 5th, about to move into the 6th. It's a fact that the Mesoamerican elders call these cycles great world ages.
Or the suns.
Or the suns. So we have had at least 4 suns or 4 great world ages. We are now closing out the 5th and moving into the 6th. Between world ages, there are exactly 1,872,000 days. Exactly. So from August 11, 3114 BC, 1,872,000 days later, is exactly the solstice of the 21st of December, 2012. So these are facts, and our indigenous people have been ancestors have been telling us this. What our own science now is beginning to understand is that those cycles define shifts in Earth's location in space. So Earth's relationship to the sun, to the center of the Milky Way, change on a cyclic basis. And when those cycles change, it changes the way we live on this planet. It changes the climate, which changes the weather. It changes where rain falls, how we grow crops, all of those things.
The electromagnetic pattern.
Sure. And our ancestors understood this. And what they said in a non-scientific way, they said, bottom line, they said, hey guys, 1,872,000 days from the last cycle. They never said it'd be the end of the world.
No.
What they said very clearly, it's the end of a world age. They did say that. And they said it would be the end of a way of life. Now, many of the people in the West, in very responsible, authoritative-sounding media, interpret that to be the end of the world. But there's I want to say very clearly, there's no scientific evidence that the world's about to end.
So you don't think it's going to end?
There's no scientific evidence. I was trained as a scientist. I was a geologist in the 70s. I worked in the defense industry in the 80s. I worked for Cisco Systems in the 90s.
Yeah.
Bringing all this together now, and what I'll say is there's no scientific evidence for the world ending in 2012 or any time in the near future. There's no scientific...
The world will not end.
Well, there's no scientific evidence of another planet heading toward our solar system. There may very possibly be one out there. If it is, it's so far away, it's not going to impact us between now. It's not going to impact us between now and the end of 2012. No. There's no scientific evidence. The magnetic field reversing, it's so strong right now it has to drop to a minimum threshold.
Hasn't it dropped? I thought in the past 80 years it's dropped. The past 20 years, 80%, the magnetic gauze.
Here's what's happening. The magnetic field of the Earth reached a peak 2,000 years ago. During the time of Jesus. And since that time, it looks like the stock market. It's gone down, up and down, but the general trend is down.
Uh-huh.
And in the last 100 years, it's gone down very quickly.
Yeah.
But here's the key. When you look into the ice cores of Antarctica, where we have 420,000 years of the history of the Earth, that we can compare it now to them to know if something is wrong.
Yeah.
And what we know is this. Those magnetic fields dropped so fast so that they are now in the range of where they always are when we reach the point in the cycle where we are right now.
Okay.
If they weren't where they are now, I would be concerned. But before those fields can flip, they have to reach a weakness, a minimum threshold.
And we're not there.
We are so far. On a very complex scale, it's the number 2. It's got to drop on VDAM scale. It's got to drop below 2.
Right on.
We're at a 7.5 right now. 5,000 years ago, the last cycle, we were between 5.5 and 10.5. Before that, we were 5.5 to 10.5. The fact that we're at 7.5 tells you we're right where we should be for right where we are right now at this point in the cycle.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so of all the
really
things to worry about, I think that's probably one of the least.
Right on.
The physical changes of the Earth,
A lot of people had questions for you about
okay,
that.
while they seem strange to us in our memory of a lifetime or our civilization,
It's common to a geological planet going thousands of miles around a big nuclear explosion.
it's common when we reach the point in the cycle where we are right now.
Right.
We haven't been in the cycle for 5,000 years. So there's no one living today that remembers this. And for me, this is the value of going into the history of the Earth.
Yeah. Very much
Realistically, what can we expect? Not speculation, not a bunch of fear, not a bunch
Hollywood.
of hype.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can we realistically expect? So realistically, what we can expect is exactly what's happening right now. But the good news is that our ancestors are very clear, and astronomers have confirmed this, that 2012 isn't about a date. It's about a window of time. It's a 36-year window. Began in 1980. It ends in 2016. This is 2012. It means we're over halfway through and well into the changes. We're already living the most frightening of those changes that we've talked about. We're already living.
Yeah.
I live in northern New Mexico, Arizona. We saw this last year. We're already living forest fires raging out of control on multiple continents.
Yeah.
We're living that. We're living the ice caps melting. We're living the sea levels rising. We're living a change in the climate. We're living in places where the crops no longer grow in their season. We're living disease with no medical cure that's killed millions of people on this earth. We're living wars on multiple continents that are based on ideas and not borders. Those
Pretty
are the
crazy time.
Those are the worst of the prophecies. So to me,
That is the worst.
to me, it's a whole different vibe to know that we're already living the worst of those prophecies, and I think we're doing a pretty good job dealing with them, rather than waiting and expecting and anticipating all this to happen on a really bad day in our future.
It's unrealistic.
Well, I know people that are they run up their credit cards.
Oh yeah,
they're not going to pay their mortgage for the rest of the year. They think the world is going to end, and I think those are the people that are going to suffer. So here's where I'm going with this. We appear to be on track for the physical changes that you would expect, that I would expect, for where we are in the cycle of 2012 right now. We appear to be on track for what our ancestors told us we could expect. I am less concerned about us getting through the physical changes. My concern is about us.
Yeah.
How do we treat one another, the personal, the cultural, the social changes? How do we deal with the crises? And this goes back to the earlier part of this conversation, do we fall into the ancient trap from Darwin's time that says we're going to compete with one another for the diminishing resources, the diminishing food, the fresh water, every man out for himself? Or do we recognize that cooperation and what's called mutual aid is actually the rule of nature, and that we are better as individuals and we help our communities and societies beyond this? This is a question it's being answered right now. This is why this is so important. And I want to talk about how we can tip the scales of that answer in our favor.
Great, because we're facing extraordinary challenges, and we're responding to them in our ordinary ways, and now we're starting to see extraordinary things start to happen. But okay, so we're all individuals, and we're all part of this unique, beautiful system that is creation and is reality and is Earth, the living system. And we say we're these separate individuals, but really we are the consciousness of the universe expressing itself as a unique experience. So when we empower ourselves and really be that and really live that, what does that look like? What does it look like for people to all express and really be grounded in what would it be like for everybody to be Jesus? For everybody to be Buddha? Like, how do we have permission to do that, and how does everybody do it?
Well, it's 5 different questions.
I know,
the answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
Because we're defining that answer right now. I don't think there is a single answer, and I think that's the beauty of our diversity. Is everyone is going to answer a little differently, and it's the diversity of those answers that will assure our success.
They come together.
If we all answered, if 7 billion people on this planet answered the big questions, and we all thought exactly the same, we answered it exactly the same way, and one day we all made a bad decision, it'd be all over. But that'll never happen because we all think differently and we learn differently. That's why there's so many teachers and so many different languages to help understand what these changes are all about. So I'm going to go back. New discoveries are giving us the leverage to create an environment of peace and cooperation in a way that is catching everybody off guard. So we have a few minutes. Can I talk about that?
Oh, of course.
I'm going to go back, and maybe if you're watching this film, you probably remember this. September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
Scientists were tipped off on that day. One of the
Global Consciousness.
The horrible thing that happened on that day. If we could say there was any good news, the good news would be that it was that event that tipped off scientists how closely we are linked together and related.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. There are 2 satellites above the northern hemisphere. Every 30 minutes, they send a signal back to the Earth telling the scientists how strong the magnetic fields of the Earth are. Okay, this is important because all life is linked through these fields. Every blade of grass, every rabbit, every hamster, every goldfish, every CEO of every corporation, every leader of every nation, there is no them in us when it comes to the magnetic field of the Earth. So we're talking about a universal, all-permeating field for life.
Yeah.
Every 30 minutes, they're measuring this field, and it ebbs and it flows, and they're very used to seeing this all day. One day, they saw this big spike, and they looked, and they overlaid it on a calendar, and the spike was at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, September 11th, 2001. 9 a.m. is 15 minutes after the first plane hit the first tower.
Yeah.
And the scientists believe it took about 15 minutes for the images to circulate the Earth through the media and for humans to respond to what they saw, not with their minds, but with their hearts, with human emotion. Now, here's why this is important. Our own science now is confirming what the indigenous ancestors said. The heart is the strongest electrical field in the body, 100 times stronger in the brain. The heart is the strongest magnetic field in the body, about 5,000 times stronger than the brain.
Yeah.
That's important because everything that we know is made of electrical and magnetic fields.
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense if you want to communicate with the stuff that heals your body or that brings peace in your community, you've got to be able to communicate with this field. The brain's not the way to do it. It's through the heart. Specifically through what we feel in our hearts.
Yeah.
So on September 11th, it was the collective outpouring of hundreds of millions, possibly billions of people in a little window of time. Heart-based emotion actually spiked those fields, strengthened the field.
Yes.
Now, if you remember, it was during those couple of days, this planet was more like a family than it's ever been.
Yes.
We were very close.
Yes.
At least for a few days, till some other stuff started to happen. That closeness is linked with the strengthening of the magnetic field.
Yeah.
And it is linked with the way human hearts created that. The experience is called coherence.
Yes.
Okay, heart-based coherence. Every moment of every day, your heart, my heart, we're sending signals to our brain. It's happening right now. And the quality of that signal tells the brain what kind of chemistry to release into the body.
Yeah.
So when we feel a sense of well-being or peace, serenity, the heart says, I'm just going to paraphrase because I'm not the heart, but the heart says, okay, we are safe. So we don't have to feel fight or flight. We don't have to release adrenaline and cortisol and stress hormones. So now we can focus on the anti-aging hormones and the healing and the strong immune systems. Our hearts can only send one signal or the other, and our brains can only do one or the other. So when we're in chronic stress, we deplete our immune system. People look older, they age faster. I mean, I'm 600 years old, and they told me I look a day over 498. So I'm doing really good. Oh, but the key is that this is the tip-off to scientists. Remember the false assumptions.
Right.
is that we're separate from our world, and that consciousness is separate from our world. This told scientists that we are linked and connected in ways we're only beginning to understand. This then those discoveries led to the belief that many humans can come together in a moment in time, and you don't need the crisis of 9/11 to create this experience.
In fact, Earth Dance does it.
That we can choose to come together and
Yeah.
choose to create coherence.
And their spike is much bigger than that.
Well, this is precisely where we're going
Yeah.
with this whole thing.
Great.
So now there is a project, the first of its kind, science-based initiative. This is called the Global Coherence Initiative. So personal coherence is good for us as individuals. Global coherence is good for everyone. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to give an example of why this is important, because I'm going to try to wrap this up. And I think a story is probably the best way to do it. Right after I was in Australia over 9/11, and right after that, I was with a group, a conference in Paris, France, about 3,500 people in the room. And for some reason, there was a man in the audience that was very agitated. The first 10 minutes of the program, security came in and they were going to kick him out. And I said, I believe there are no access. I said, well, you can have him leave the room, but don't kick him out completely. I said, have him wait in the hall 10 minutes. Actually, 3 minutes. And while he was in that hall, 3 minutes, what we did was went through an exercise. It parallels what our indigenous ancestors do, what the Tibetan monks and nuns do, what many of the Native Americans in North America do with the shaman and the Andes of Bolivia and Peru. It's about moving into our hearts and having genuine feelings of care, appreciation, and gratitude.
Yeah.
Did that for 3 minutes. Then we had the angry French man. He came back up. Came back into the room. My French is terrible, so we had a translator, and I gave him a mic. And I said, okay, tell me what's up. What are you feeling? He said, this is the strangest thing, through the translator who's saying this. He said, in my mind, I know why I'm mad. I'm still mad. He said, but I can't feel the anger in my heart. He says, I can't find the emotion of the anger.
Wow.
He couldn't be angry. He could think the reason for the anger, but he couldn't get to the anger. The reason I'm sharing the story is because what happened with that man in that room on that day is possible for a planet.
Yes.
It's very difficult for a leader of a nation to declare war on another nation if they're not feeling that anger. And every one of us, it seems like the problems are so big, every one of us have the opportunity. We all have a vote with our hearts, because every moment of every day we are feeding and nourishing this field. The question is, what do we feed the field? What did you feed the field today? What am I feeding the field today?
Yeah.
Because our individual, how we treat one another at the grocery store or on the freeway when you're trying to make an exit and somebody cuts you off at the pass, how do you respond? Occupy. Occupy is a perfect example. People have asked me, Greg, are you on board with Occupy? And what I say is this: the system definitely is corrupt.
Right.
Definitely broken, definitely needs to be fixed. And I will work toward positive change any day of the week with my life. And I've done it all my life.
Yes.
You've never seen me fight against something.
That's right.
And this is now, it helps to understand why. The field that connects all life doesn't make a distinction between good violence and bad violence. All it knows is when there's a disruption in the field.
It's incoherent.
Incoherent. So when people are out angrily tearing down an existing system, what they are actually doing, and maybe not aware of it, is they're feeding the very incoherence that they hoped and claimed they would like to change.
Totally.
It's a subtle and it's a powerful difference.
Yeah, Mother Teresa.
And I think it's an important difference. So if we really are choosing to walk our talk, and if we really believe that this is the pivotal point in the history of the world, whether you believe in 2012 or not, whether you believe what scientists are telling you or not, you just look out your back door and you know your life's changing.
Yeah.
It is our opportunity to come together with heart-based, coherent emotions that I believe is the wild card.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it's what our indigenous prophecies have all said. So now
now
we're come full circle. Here we are, 7 billion people, which gives us more opportunities to make the change, by the way. It's not a bad thing. It's
More
7 billion
connections.
people.
Yeah.
Exactly. More connections on the planet. The last year of a 5,125-year-long cycle called the Great World Age, when Earth's position in space changed the way we live on this planet, and we interpret that change as crisis. It doesn't have to be. We interpret it that way.
The Earth is shaking.
And now, the only way for us to work our way through these crises is to transcend what has separated us in the past, the false beliefs.
Right.
And one of the greatest false beliefs is survival of the strongest. Every man, every dog for himself, every man out for himself, every woman out for themselves. And the idea that might makes right. Because the whole idea of force is no longer working. And when it comes to wars of the past that were clearly delineated by boundaries of nations, it was clear when a war began, when it ended. There was something of value to the person that won. All those parameters are gone now. If we use the technology we have, nobody's going to win today. A war of ideas, there's no way to know definitively when is that war complete. How do you know when that war is complete? What we're doing is we're rewriting the rules of the game. When we feed this field of compassion, we have the opportunity to do for our planet what we did for that man in the room in France.
Right.
We create a field where we might know the reasons for things that have separated us in the past, but we're not going to feel them the same any longer. It's not supported. And the data very clearly shows us, Xavier, that personal coherence, if you can think in the blackboard of or the whiteboard of your mind, personal coherence leads to social coherence, leads to global coherence that supports our personal coherence.
Exactly. As part of my work as a medicine person, I do that as much as I can in a musical setting. We build up a ceremonial presence that musical people can dance to, and I help each person through exercises that you might have done, in the back eye, and build up a personal coherence for everybody, help them get their thing, then build the group mind or the group coherence, and then take that energy and set an intention and send out that vibe or that field, to go heal some part of the planet. And it sounds a little out there for a lot of people, but it really works. I mean,
our ancestors have done it for a long time, but if it is out there, here's where the science comes in. What the science has shown is optimum coherence is a low frequency, 0.10 hertz. Whatever we need to do to create 0.10 hertz in our heart, this is the language that whales use, very, very low frequency. Whatever feeling creates 0.10 hertz. And for many people, it is associated with what we call care. Gratitude and appreciation. And when we can create that in our lives and our family, that is 0.10 hertz is where the healing in our bodies, it actually triggers the stem cells in our bodies, sends them to work, puts them into action so they can begin the personal healing, but the effects extend beyond our body into a larger environment. And think of it this way, when there's a big event like 9/11, or the reactor meltdown in Japan, Fukushima, or the tsunami or the earthquake. And the world knows about that. There's this ripple that goes through, this ripple of fear and chaos that goes through the day the stock market lost 777 points and people watched their life savings disappear in a matter of hours. Coherence, when we come together, I'm not going to say it's like coherence against chaos. It doesn't work that way, but the coherence can actually offset the power of that incoherence significantly. So I think the bottom line for us, the world's changing, and the world that we have all known in the past is gone. And those that are clinging to the old, unsustainable ways of living, those are the people having a tough time.
That's so clear.
Having a very, very difficult time. If we can recognize that the world that existed in the past worked so well, it got us where we are today. And not judge. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's a learning curve. It's what we knew.
It's something that served us for so far.
But those who are promising to get us back and who are clinging to old, unsustainable ways of living, whether we're talking about our ideas of money or economy, savings, job, careers, work, those people are having a really tough time.
Yeah.
And what I've found is this, and I know we're going to close here. And just
very shortly. One last question and we're good.
Well, I think what I've found is this. It's interesting. People all over the world have asked me, what is it? If you had one thing to say, what would it be, or what would help us to get through this change? And what I found is this: it's the way that you and I answer a very simple question. We were raised in a generation in a world where, consciously or subconsciously, our conditioning asks this question, and the question is, what can I get from the world that exists today? What can I get from this world. If we can make the subtle but powerful shift from that question into the new question, what can I give to the world that's emerging? What can I give to the world that is emerging? The way we answer that question, it opens the door to powerful new opportunities in jobs, career, community, families, ways of thinking about our own personal skills in our lives. And those are the people that are thriving, truly thriving right now, when so many people in the traditional world are suffering so much right now. What can I give to the world that's emerging? Ask yourself that every day and allow the life for the rest of the day to be the answer. And it's pretty amazing.
That's beautiful. That reminded me of JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that. I'll channel JFK.
Right. Ask not what the world can do for you, but what can you do for the world, right? Yeah, so my last question, and I really just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to do this. It's been really amazing. The question is if you could take a paintbrush, since we are all in the process of creating this new emerging world, what would you like to see? What is the vision of the...
I don't have a vision for the new world. I prefer to let it emerge and unfold. But the principles and the parameters that I'd like to see that world evolve upon were the honoring of all life, all life.
Yeah.
Animal life, plant life, just the profound reverence for the mystery and truly the mystery and the beauty of life. And the new discoveries are telling us that life is not as common as we've been led to believe. No. It certainly is not random, and there is something truly remarkable that underlies a physical presence. So it's the honoring of the principles of life, the honoring of the diversity of life, the diversity of all people. I think I'll tell you how people ask me this question a lot. They say, are we moving toward a global something, a global government or a global world?
Right.
And my answer is, what makes you think we're not already there? I mean, we've got global commerce, we've got global stock markets, we've got global trade, we've got global energy, we've got global resources. I think we are moving toward a global economy.
Maybe a global coherence?
My sense is. And so they say, was that right or wrong? Is it good or bad? I don't know the answer because it's all in how it's done.
Yeah.
I think if we created a global infrastructure where every human on this earth had what they need, clean food, clean water, a place to live, and the opportunities to express and excel, I think it would be a really powerful, beautiful world. If it were done from a place of greed, competition, I think it could be disastrous. But if every people in every nation, if we kept what makes us unique, if we keep our unique music, I don't want like a global music forum.
Right.
As a musician, I especially don't want that. Or if we keep our unique art, our unique culture, our unique languages, all the things that make us unique, but we share the things that we have in common that we all need. And everyone has food, water, power, medicine, and technology. And if it could happen suddenly, I don't think it's something, the problem would be if it happened slowly over a long period of time, because there are people that have, people that don't have, and that's a problem. But if in a relatively brief period of time, the leaders of this world got together and said, look, we're at a critical time, we're going to make a big change.
Everybody has food, clean water.
And this is what we propose. And I think it could be a good thing. We are moving forward. I don't think we're going to move back. Can we stop the change? No. Would we want to? Probably not. I think we have the rare opportunity to direct where the change leads and to soften the impact of the suffering. And I think coherence, heart-based coherence, is a powerful tool in helping us do that. So that's what I'd like to see.
Right on. Thank you very much.
My brother, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So
thank you all.
Ask not what the world can do for you, but what you can do for the world. And you are extraordinary, and you have permission to be extraordinary and share your gifts, because that's what the world really needs. Would you say that?
I absolutely would say that.
True MC.